Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, everybody, what's going on? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome back to Big 12 Insiders. Appreciate everybody being in here. Look, it's basketball time. I know football season still has another game, and technically the NFL is going on, but we're in the middle of January, people. It's time to start talking hoops. And believe it or not, regardless of my size and what I may look like, I am a hoops person. Love basketball. Like I said, I grew up technically in Louisville, in Indiana. It's just across the river. So I grew up in basketball country. So I am a gigantic basketball fan. And the Big 12 plays great basketball within it. So, but today we got to talk about the identity of the Big 12 and what needs to happen for the Big 12 to maybe stake its claim, shall I say, as far as being the premier basketball conference. So, but before we get into that, remember to like, follow, subscribe, continue to get in that comment section. And as always hit that notification bell so you know exactly when Big 12 Insiders content comes out. I almost said my football Steelers channel. So, but without further ado, let's kind of get into this. So first off, there's a huge game tonight. Iowa State hosting Kansas. Big game. Iowa State, and both of them are legitimate Final Four contenders. Kansas is kind of that way pretty much every year. Although last year you could probably see about mid-season Kansas wasn't going to make it to the Final Four. It just didn't shoot it well enough, wasn't deep enough. That's a different story for Kansas this year. I think they can make a run. There's a few teams in the Big 12 that can do that. But here's the thing. As far as a conference is concerned, first off, coming into the season, there was a lot of people that thought that the Big 12 would be the best conference. I was one of those people, that they had a lot of teams that I thought could do some damage in the tournament. But I don't know. I shouldn't say that isn't necessarily the case. Again, it's January 15th, so still fairly early in the season per se. A lot of things that can shake out, but it hasn't. The number of teams hasn't been as good as what we may have initially have thought. Now, I'm sure this is a ESPN, just bonanza that they're just loving this because the SEC has all these ranked teams, which, okay, that's fine. I tend to go by the net a little bit more because, rankings can be manipulated. I guess you could say the net can too. But I tend to go by that a little bit more than what I do rankings because sometimes people don't see all these teams playing. They just don't. And it's impossible to see everybody on a consistent basis. You just can't do that. So that's not what's happening. But as far as the net is concerned, the Big 12 got 3 teams in the top 10, 6 in the top 25. Houston, Iowa State, Kansas are all in the top 10 legitimate Final Four contenders. And I wouldn't say anybody else is not a legitimate Final Four contender. Down at the bottom of that top 25, Arizona, I think, is sitting at 22. Arizona's playing some really good basketball as of late. They are. They took some lumps early, kind of finding their way. But that's kind of where this conference is. I think it got a little bit top heavy, and it hasn't been as consistent from top to bottom as what I thought it would be. And I think a lot of other people thought it would be. The SEC is probably better when you go from top to bottom on a consistent basis. Now, their bottom and our bottom are absolutely awful. And we'll get to power rankings maybe later this week, probably do it next week. But the Big 12's got an identity crisis. And what I mean by that is that they have to do some damage in the tournament. Now, I know there's going to be a ton of people come out here and say, come on, Big B, look, the tournament, you got to have luck involved. There's a lot of things, health. There's a lot of things that you have to be able to navigate and have success in the tournament. That's true. You do. But that doesn't change the fact that the Big 12 needs to be able to navigate that. Now, you can't, obviously, nobody can can choose their luck. Look at Houston last year, cruising right along, and then the best player, and not only on their team, one of the best players in the country gets hurt in a Sweet 16 game and can only play, 12, 13 minutes, and they lose the game by 3. In a game, they were better than Duke. We all knew that. But you take away one of the best players in the country, then you don't beat Duke, and so that's kind of what it is. Iowa State, good team, really good team, gets upset in the Sweet 16. But it is what it is. Last year, the Big 12 flamed out. Let's just call it what it is. They flamed out in the tournament. They had 2 teams. They had 8 total get in. Only 2 made it to the Sweet 16. Nobody made it past that. And that's what kind of people were saying, well, the Big 12 manipulated the net early on by playing a lot of unranked teams, and they had this high net, which I don't know if I necessarily buy that. I think it was just, the Big 12 cannibalized itself. Cincinnati, probably a team that should have made it over, especially a team like Virginia. I remember that from last year. But it is what it is. You got to show up in the tournament because, unfortunately, that's all that anybody remembers. Now, you could have a great season, but if you flame out early in the tournament, that's what people remember. And the Big 12's got to get back. They've got to fight back and start eating away at what people are talking about. For instance, the SEC has several teams. Before, I guess 10 years ago, when you thought of SEC, you thought of Kentucky first, Florida second, and really nobody else after that. That's what you thought of when it came to basketball. It's not the case anymore. SEC has got teams. Auburn's good. Alabama's incredible. The Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas is not any good. But they have teams that are good. Now you have, I guess, Texas, Oklahoma, really good teams in the SEC right now. Big 12 can say the same thing. But early in the season, like Arizona's lost 5 games, they took their lumps early, so people see that and they write Arizona off. I would say by the end of the year, Arizona's going to be one of the better teams in the country. The net is kind of proving that right now, and they're playing some really good basketball within the Big 12 conference right now. Maybe they've hit their stride. I don't know. But that's kind of where I'm at with this. You got to do stuff in March. If the Big 12 doesn't do anything in March, we can't stake claim to being one of the best conferences or being the best conference. For instance, in football, I talk about it all the time. Big 12's got to win some games. They got to show up and play well in these playoff games. If you don't, then we can't earn the respect that people aren't rightfully giving us. Here's a situation in basketball where the Big 12 kind of gets a lot of the respect, but if you don't show up, it's going to get taken away. I mentioned ESPN and the SEC. They're starting to do that now, as everybody is saying, and whether it's true or not, SEC first, Big 10 second, Big 12 third. The only way to change that narrative, you got to do something in March. And here's another hit. For so long, the Big 12 had been it was a Kansas-dominated league for so long. And the knock on that was always, how good could the conference really be if the same team wins it over and over and over again? And they got a point when people said that. I mean, how do you fight that? But my comeback to that was always, well, look at Kansas. Who else is just running through Kansas? Like, is Kansas out there losing like 7, 8, 9 conference games a year? That wasn't happening. So who are these other teams that are just beating Kansas if they were in this conference? There wasn't. So while Kansas was the team that always won, that was because Kansas was always very good. And there wasn't like when they played, because, Kansas, they schedule anybody. They play in Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Michigan State, whoever, you name it, they played them. Still do. And Kansas wasn't losing all those basketball games. So if that's your argument, well, nobody else is running through Kansas, so why should these other teams? And it's not that these other teams weren't any good. It's just Kansas was crazy good. I mean, think of all the pros that Kansas had on their team. at the same time. It's incredible. Not to mention, in my opinion, they have also had the best coach in college basketball, Bill Self. That helps. But is it a changing of the guard in the Big 12? And that's when it comes back to the identity crisis. When people think of the Big 12, they think of Kansas. Well, we got some new teams now. Is Arizona? I know a lot of people love the fact that Arizona was coming into the conference. I'm one of those people. Arizona is one of those basketball schools. Now, they haven't had a ton of success in the tournament, especially as of late, but they're one of those schools that you think, okay, they can rival what Kansas is doing. Iowa State is a team that can do it. Baylor has won our national championship recently. There's schools out there that can challenge to make this conference good. I'm not slighting anybody. Like I did mention Texas Tech. I'm not saying that they're not any good or anything like that. So don't hold my feet to the fire. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just simply bringing up as far as brands and schools that can be the leader of this conference. Kansas is first. Can somebody challenge that? In football, we talked about all year about the parity in the conference was to our advantage. Is that having parity meant that we were strong top to bottom, and because we don't have a blue blood, and we didn't necessarily need one because the parity is where the strength was. For years, the blue blood and the program, the lead dog in the Big 12 conference in football was Oklahoma. Texas fans aren't going to like that, but what are they going to argue? Argue with facts? I'm sorry. Oklahoma dominated the Big 12 for the last 20 years that they were in it. I'm not saying they won it every year, but the school that everybody wanted to get to was OU, and everybody knew it. They were the standard. In the Big 12, it's been Kansas for a long, long time. Now, is it better if Kansas is being challenged? If there's several teams that can challenge that throne? I think it is. I think having, and again, I'm just mentioning the teams that are really good this year. Obviously, Iowa State, Houston. Is it good to have those teams that can challenge the top of the threshold? Is it better for the conference? Now, what I would say is the separation from the top to the bottom, we're starting to see a lot of separation from the Kansas, the Houston, the Iowa States, Texas Tech, Baylor. I mean, you're starting to see some separation from the Kansas States of the world. I thought Cincinnati was going to be good. They're not any good, at least up to this point. They're not going to be any good, or they haven't been any good, I should say. Oklahoma State, it's starting to, the separation is starting to be there. Is that good? Do we want that? What's the perception nationwide? Because as much as we don't care about national or what people nationally think, we should care because, again, it comes back to how many teams get in the tournament. If you don't have that nationwide respect, the Big 12 might get 6 teams in a year they should get 9. That's the reason that I bring stuff up like that. It's not that I care what Jeff Goodman says, although I think Jeff Goodman is great, by the way. But it's not so much that I care. It's that we need these people. We need these people to be on the side of the Big 12. We need them to talk about the Big 12 more. And I think the more time, the more teams that we get talked about at the top of this conference, the better it is. And when I mean the top, I mean the tip top of the conference, the better it is. Have 3 or 4 teams, 5 teams that challenge that are really, really good. But again, I'll come back to this. It's fine if you challenge for the Big 12 title every year, but then you have to take it into March. You got to take it into March because without success in March, does it mean anything? That's the thing. Does it really mean anything? And you can say, and I used to hear Kansas fans say this for years because they were winning the Big 12 over and over again. Well, it means more to win a conference that you play for 2 months than it does in the NCAA tournament. I couldn't laugh any harder in those people's faces. And you're trying to tell me that winning the conference, just because it's 2 months long, is more important than March Madness. I mean, just stop the nonsense. I get it. You didn't win it every year. I get it. There was a couple of years Kansas was getting upset by, what was it, Bucknell and Bradley. You know, they were getting upset in the first round. Totally understand why you would say that, but let's just deal in reality, people. The March Madness is what it is, because you could finish, heck, what was the year UConn finished like 9th in the Big East with Kemba Walker? They get on a run, they get hot, they go win the national championship. Does anybody remember that they finished 9th in the Big East that year? No. But they do remember they went on that run and won the national championship. So while teams can vie for the top of the Big 12 conference to knock off, because again, Kansas is the standard. Let's not kid ourselves. Kansas is the standard. But that doesn't mean there's not other teams that are up there and can get up there. But Kansas is it as of now. But you got to have success in March. And I'm not saying you got to win a national championship every year. I'm not saying that, because that's not realistic. But you do have to get to Final Fours. You do have to get past, the second round. Get past the Sweet 16. Live in the Elite Eight. Let that be your low barrier. That's what I'm talking about as far as success in March. Because to say that you have to get to the Final Four every single year, again, not something that's realistic. But you can get to the Elite Eight. You can do that. You can live there. Are you going to make it every year? No, I'm not saying that. But that can be your standard, is getting to that level. And that's the type of level of success that the Big 12 needs to start having on a consistent basis, so that the narrative of the conference doesn't get snatched away from us. Because they started to do that last year. We all know it. They talked about it. Big 12 manipulating the net, weren't really as good as what everybody thought. See, in the tournament time, you see what happens. No team gets past the Sweet 16. We put 8 teams in. Maybe they should have only gotten 5. That's what I'm talking about. You can't let them rip the narrative away, because they want to. They want to. Not to mention, you have to deal with another conference, a power conference in the Big East in basketball. And believe you me, the Big East plays really good basketball. I'm not saying they got 10 teams that are great. I'm just saying they play good basketball. Let's not forget about that conference as well. So the narrative is out there. Is the Big 12 overrated? It's Kansas, maybe Houston, Iowa State, Baylor's okay, Texas Tech's okay, but none of those teams do any good in the tournament. Look what Texas Tech last year in the tournament didn't do any good. TCU, same thing. And so I think it's got to be one of those where the Big 12's got to take this thing by the horns and say, yeah, we're going to beat each other up in the regular season, but that's only going to make us tougher when it comes time to play in March, because in March, we're going to have 4 teams in the Sweet 16 minimum. We're going to have 2 to 3 teams in the Elite Eight, and we're going to have a team or 2 in the Final Four. And that's going to be the standard for this conference every single year. That's what the Big 12 needs to get to. They got to get to that point. Again, bringing in the teams that they brought in. Arizona, brand, huge brand. Haven't had the success in the tournament. So does it necessarily help the conference perception? Not until they do. Same thing with everybody else. We've got to start putting our best foot forward in that tournament, people. I know that stinks, but it's reality, man. It's just reality. Nobody cares that who wins the Big 12. Yes, as fans and people that cover the conference, we care. But I don't know about you, but I'm tired of being disrespected as somebody that covers the Big 12. I'm tired of the conference being disrespected. Sometimes you got to go snatch respect. Sometimes you got to make somebody respect you. Well, we have an opportunity to do that, because they do respect Kansas, and they respect Iowa State and Arizona and Houston. They respect them, but do they put them really on the upper echelon? Kansas is up there with the Dukes and the North Carolinas and the UConns, but is anybody else? And do we deserve to be? I think we do, but now we got to go prove it. I'm excited for the season. I'm glad it's here. I apologize for any basketball fans that it took me this long to get here, but I felt it was important to talk about the other stuff until we were done. I've turned the page on football. We'll still, like I mentioned, we'll still cover certain aspects of it, but I really want to dive into basketball because I think the Big 12's got something super special. And this narrative that's going around right now about how the SEC and Big Ten are just so much better. You see it. You see it happening. You look at the rankings. You look how people are talking. You see it. And we got to smack that down as soon as possible, man. So appreciate you guys being here. Thank you guys as always. Remember, like, follow, subscribe, get into the comments section. Let me know what you think. We appreciate you guys. Aloha.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.